Welcome to Crossroads. The Chinese Communist Party has large-scale programs to wage political warfare in other countries. And there are some concerns now that the CCP is trying to subvert the political systems of other countries by gaining influence over key political figures and even influencers. Now, look, recently there's been a string of incidents raising concerns that the Chinese Communist Party is waging an aggressive operation right now to control foreign politics. Now, just a couple weeks ago, the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability held a second hearing on how to defend the United States from the CCP's political warfare ops. And according to a House memo, the hearing aimed to, quote, delve deeper into CCP influence and infiltration into specific sectors within the U.S., including within the business community, federal agencies, and international institutions. And it looked into, quote, how federal agencies can protect these communities and entities from CCP tactics and counter political warfare operations. Now, the first of these hearings came just a couple months before that. That was in mid-April. And this is what the committee's chair, Representative James Comer, had to say at the time. Watch.
What is the CCP? It is the ruling authoritarian regime of China. While it is enslaving its own people in forced labor camps in China, it is also brazenly engaging in dozens of forms of warfare against America. Each warfare tactic seeks the destruction of our country. For decades, the CCP has sought to infiltrate and influence every aspect of American society. Chief among the party's tactics is political warfare. Political warfare is meant to influence the emotions, motives, and behavior of Americans in a manner favorable to China's objectives. By waging political warfare, the CCP seeks to weaken America so that we can not effectively fight in a kinetic war. According to the CCP itself, the battlefield will be everywhere.
Representative Comer goes on to note that a large part of these CCP operations are carried out by its United Front Work Department. And for those of you who watch Crossroads for a while now might be familiar with it. The United Front is one of the Chinese Communist Party's largest operations to subvert other countries. And what it is it's a branch under the Chinese Communist Party of their government. It works alongside a second one called the Overseas Chinese Affairs Office. And what these two organizations do, these government agencies in conjunction with each other, is essentially try to build CCP provinces in other countries. And the way it works is this. The Chinese consulates or Chinese embassies, whether it's in New York or California or France or Germany or wherever else, these work like government agencies representing a provincial government, but on foreign soil. The CCP gives them directives. They carry out what they call liaison work, where they send out agents of influence to go into circles of influence, political circles, business circles, other things like that, and to also do outreach, United Front work, as they call it, where they go to, for example, Chinese front organizations, tongs, fraternal organizations, unions, and through that, give them business deals, get them involved in honey traps, get them working for the CCP, whether through benefits or through blackmail. And once they establish those networks of influence, they gain influence then over the organizations and every person underneath them. What this then establishes is a quote-unquote united front. And for the CCP, this is the battleground in other countries through which they try to gain influence over politics, over business, over influencers, over media, over everything they can. Now, the general idea of this, of United Front work, is to control the civil society of other countries. And what that means is this. It's a theory of who actually governs a country, what establishes government. Now, you have, of course, the official government of a country, right? The party that rules or whatever else. But then you have civil society, which, again, is the governed of the government. And what the CCP tries to do through United Front work is change the allegiance of the civil society, change the ideology of the civil society, so that while you have a government that technically controls it, the CCP is actually what is governing the civil society. through, for example, censorship in the business community, through censorship in Hollywood, through censorship of news outlets operating in China and not wanting to lose that access, through business interests that might, for example, change the policies of businesses, through, for example, policies to have businesses even lobby the established government, including in the United States, by the way, on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. And through this, the CCP creates what are essentially puppet states. They get the government to, again, kind of bow down to the civil society, while the civil society follows the Chinese Communist Party. Now, in some countries, this is much further along, and some it's a little further behind. But this is becoming a growing concern right here in the United States, a big concern in Canada, a very large concern in most of Asia, and frankly, becoming a bigger concern than most of the free world. But back to the recent hearings. Representative Comer notes as well that a large focus of these types of CCP operations is also to sow division among Americans, and to carry out a long list of other operations meant to weaken the United States in particular, in order to shift global power instead to the Chinese Communist Party. And this is an important point. The Chinese Communist Party, in its operations throughout the entire world, regards the United States as the main entity blocking it from achieving world governance. The United States and the U.S. model of, for example, human rights and the idea that rights are given to us by God and the role of government is to protect those rights, these God-given rights. That is essentially fundamentally different from the ideology of the Chinese Communist Party, whereby the party is the basis of morality. The party is the basis of what is right and wrong, and the party has absolute power. Any power above it is seen as a threat to the CCP and is crushed. And the CCP's system of diplomacy and working with other countries is essentially that they say, don't criticize us, we won't criticize you, we'll work together regardless of what you do to your citizens, and they have essentially a system where human rights are not recognized. These two systems represent the battle of the world right now in the CCP's eyes. And because of that, they want to undermine the United States by dividing us, by turning Americans against each other, by getting us so focused on internal conflicts that we cannot hold together, and then the CCP can point to the U.S. on the world stage and say, look at what democracy looks like. Look at what freedom looks like. It is unstable, it is chaotic. We bring stability and peace, and that is the narrative they push, while of course representing a system that crushes human rights, representing a system that crushes religion, a system that tolerates nothing else other than the absolute rule of the ruling communist regime. Now, in January of this year, in terms of this battle, FBI Director Christopher Wray also spoke about the threat the United States is now facing from the Chinese Communist Party. And here's what he had to say. Watch.
I do want to make very clear that my comments today are not about the Chinese people, and certainly not about Chinese Americans who contribute much to our country and are frankly often the victims of Chinese Communist Party aggression themselves. Rather, when I talk about the threat posed by China, I mean the government of China, in particular led by the CCP. The CCP's dangerous actions, China's multi-pronged assault on our national and economic security, make it the defining threat of our generation. I do not want those watching today to think we can't protect ourselves. But I do want the American people to know that we cannot afford to sleep on this danger. As a government and a society, we've got to remain vigilant and actively defend against the threat that Beijing poses. Otherwise, China has shown it will make us pay.
FBI Director Wray goes on to describe how the CCP's military, the PLA, is using cyber attacks to actively attack the economic security of the United States. He explains how the CCP is recruiting spies inside American businesses to steal intellectual property. And he also says that the CCP's operations are even directly targeting the basic freedoms of Americans, carrying out operations, for example, to silence, coerce, and threaten the people in this country. And he also notes how the U.S. government has established a large-scale operation that includes, interestingly, not just U.S. intelligence agencies, but also partnerships within the private sector and even with other countries to defend against these operations of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, look, a couple years ago, Christopher Wray also noted the seriousness of the threat from the CCP. Back in January of 2022, he compared the CCP threat to that of the Soviet Union during the Cold War, and to the operations notably that the FBI was carrying out, again during the fight against the Soviet Union, against ideological subversion. I'll be talking more about this, though, after we get back from a quick break.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges with a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold. You can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. There are major concerns right now that the United States is being subverted and targeted with this from the Chinese Communist Party, and frankly, not just even the United States, even other countries as well. Key political figures, influencers, all of them right now are being targeted by the CCP. And this is part of their large-scale programs for what is called political warfare. Now, recently, a series of incidents are raising concerns that the Chinese Communist Party is pushing an aggressive operation to control foreign politics. The CCP is trying to dominate other countries. But let's take a step back a couple years ago. FBI Director Christopher Wray noted at the time the seriousness of the threat from the CCP. This was back in January of 2022. He compared the CCP threat to that of the Soviet Union during the Cold War, and notably to the operations that the FBI was carrying out against Soviet subversion. Because again, during the Cold War, a lot of it was a spy war. But Christopher Wray went on to note a key difference between the battle then with the Soviet Union and the battle right now with the Chinese Communist Party. And the big difference is this: the Chinese Communist Party is an economic power that has become deeply intertwined with the economies of the free world. American businesses are deeply intertwined with it. Our economy is deeply intertwined with it. And the CCP uses these networks as part of its operations to subvert, to steal, and to influence us. Here are Christopher Wray's comments from 2 years ago. Watch.
The complexity of the threat posed by the Chinese government flows from those new realities. Because China's government has the global reach and presence of a great nation, but it refuses to act the part, and too often uses its capabilities to steal and threaten rather than to cooperate and build. And that theft, those threats, are happening right here in America literally every day. That's what I want to talk to you about tonight. The threat posed by the Chinese government here at home to our economic security and to our freedoms. Our freedom of speech, of conscience, our freedom to elect and be served by our representatives without foreign meddling, our freedom to prosper when we toil and invent. I've spoken a lot about this threat since I became FBI director, but I want to focus on it here tonight because in many ways it's reached a new level, more brazen, more damaging than ever before, and it's vital that all of us focus on that threat together.
Aside from the economic threats and the Chinese Communist Party's operations to threaten and harass people even within U.S. borders, it seems the communist regime is also carrying out operations to interfere with elections and also politics, not just here in the United States, but globally. A Czech study from the Association for International Affairs recently warned that the CCP's operations along these lines being carried out against the European Union are becoming serious. They say this: in comparison to Russia, China may be a relative newcomer to electoral interference in Europe, yet with its increasingly sophisticated expertise and operational acumen, there is growing evidence to suggest that it is actively seeking to influence European elections and decision-making. As illustrated in the opening section of this study, it says, China utilizes a complex and ever-expanding array of tools, from leveraging political influence through established party-to-party contacts, to engaging in information manipulation and acts of bribery and espionage. Now, a big part of that, of course, has to do with, for example, the Chinese Communist Party carrying out those liaison operations that we discussed earlier, sending agents of influence into political circles, inviting officials on trips to China, inviting new administrations on trips to China, and while they're there, trying to subvert them in various different ways. Now, one of the key differences between Chinese influence operations under the CCP and, for example, Western intelligence operations is this. In the West, in the United States and most of the free world, if an individual gets engaged in espionage, if they agree to become an informant or something else, typically they look at the motivations of that based on the acronym MICE. That is money, ideology, coercion, or ego. Those are the things that will drive somebody, typically, at least by Western analysis, to become an agent, to inform an agency, for example, betraying an organization or otherwise. In China, under the Chinese Communist Party, it's different. They don't look at paying people off per se, it's part of it. They don't just look at a person's ego or ideology or otherwise, right? Or anything that would motivate them in Western standards. What the CCP looks at instead is using a kind of devil's advocate approach. The CCP wants to use your moral flaws. And so what they look at is not MICE, right? The acronym MICE. What they look at instead is how to advance their agendas by taking advantage of a person's moral flaws. Lust, greed, power, these types of things. And so they will, for example, use honey traps. If an individual goes to China, they might find themselves drugged or getting extremely drunk and then seduced by maybe an underage girl or something of the sorts, which will then, of course, be videotaped, and the CCP will then use it as a form of blackmail. They also have, for example, things on fame. If an individual is attached to becoming famous, and that's their moral flaw, the Chinese Communist Party will literally roll out the red carpet. They do this to intellectuals oftentimes. So if you're, for example, a Western intellectual, a doctor not properly recognized by your own country, you get an invitation to go speak at a fancy event in China. They literally roll out a red carpet for you. You're presented with an audience of Chinese students oftentimes or academics who praise you, who stoke your ego, who say, how are you not recognized in your country? You must be so famous. And of course, through this process, the individual will come to believe, hey, I'm supported here, these people recognize me, and through that they become, they end up shifting their allegiance oftentimes more to the CCP. And through that process, of course, the individual is pretending to support this individual and pretending to praise this individual, oftentimes, again, actors or agents themselves. The individual become deeply intertwined with the CCP, and they will feed their ideologies to this academic or this journalist or this influencer of whatever sorts they are. And again, through this, the CCP gains influence not only over this individual, but over their network of influence, because this individual then began repeating, for example, Chinese Communist Party slogans and Chinese Communist Party talking points. They subvert them. In the same way, businesses, they will, for example, give business opportunities. In the same way with politicians, they might mobilize their Western forces to support the campaigns of a certain politician. And it's through these methods of, again, going after a person's need for power, for money, for fame, or for lust, or whatever it is, that the CCP is able to expand its influence using underhanded means. But back to this report, noting how the CCP is trying to expand its operations in Europe, including over the elections and even over individual political parties. According to a 2020 study by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, over the past decade, it says, it's been reported that China has targeted 10 elections in 7 states and regions. I would say even that's a low estimate, frankly. And on this as well, they note that there's a strong focus on Taiwan and also other countries in the Indo-Pacific region. The report also notes that methods employed by the CCP include, they say, various cyber operations such as denial of service attacks and phishing attacks. A denial of service attack, or DOS attack, is where you overload a certain network, and because you overload it, you shut down the website. People can no longer access it. They do this oftentimes as a way to distract while they hack the company from behind the scenes, or just to deny people access to a certain website during key times. This, for example, could be used during a key debate where sources of information that would be necessary for people to have access to are then denied, and people can only access things that they want you to have access to. It also includes, as they note, phishing attacks. And those are operations basically to lure people with false emails or false text messages. You click a link, and through that you infect your computer and let the hackers gain access to your machines. They also note it includes to disrupt voting infrastructure and target electronic and online voting. Interestingly, because this is one of the big issues we're facing in other countries, one of the big concerns, because they say it also includes vote tabulation, suggesting the Chinese Communist Party and its hackers can even alter the outcome of elections if they're able to gain access, of course, to the tabulation. It notes it as well as the use of, quote, online information operations to exploit the digital presence of election campaigns, politicians, journalists, and voters. Now, these CCP operations target countries both large and small. Recently, in fact, the president of Palau raised the alarm over this in a recent interview with Reuters. Watch this.
Well, I think in every election, the Chinese are always involved. One of the things that we know is that it's the president who ultimately decides who you have diplomatic relations with. And so, obviously, they know where my stance is. So, I guess I would be the enemy, right? and so you would probably want to remove me and put somebody else in that would be more friendly to those overtures by China. You know, and really in Palau, all we want peace on the Taiwan Straits. We want to preserve the status quo, and we understand our role as being in the westernmost part of the Pacific, allied with the United States, that maintaining peace and security in the region is important for all of us.
The pushback against the CCP's operations to subvert political systems isn't just limited to the United States either. There's been an interesting string of cases recently suggesting that the world is beginning to push back. I'll be talking about more of this only on EpochTV.com. That's our uncensored streaming platform of the Epoch Times. So if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, X, or Rumble, click the link in the description below and gain access to the rest of this episode. Not only will you get my whole library of shows, but also the other great shows we have, as well as family-friendly movies, premium investigative reports, and also hard-hitting documentaries on the issues that really matter. In fact, my documentary, The Final War, exposes one of the biggest threats to the United States, the Chinese Communist Party. And in The Final War, I expose the CCP's 100-year plan to defeat the United States, and also what it means for America if they were to succeed. This infiltration and subversion by the CCP is one of the biggest but least understood issues that is impacting the future of this country. And it's such an important issue, frankly, that I've dedicated my career to warning people about the threats from the CCP. Now, if you'd like to watch this documentary, you can find the link in the description below as well. It's called The Final War, and I'll show you a trailer before you go exclusively to EpochTV.com. I'll see you there.
The greatest threat facing the United States is the CCP.
The Epoch Times investigation team had studied the CCP for years, but what we uncovered was yielding evidence beyond our imagination.
With Chairman Mao, with the Prime Minister, Our talks have been characterized by frankness.
The Clinton administration said, oh, don't worry about it. This will be a poison pill for China.
China's strategic goal is to make sure that the U.S. has 4 enemies, and one of them must be a terrorist group.
We are giving of our life's blood so that the Chinese Communist Party can survive and thrive.